For most of history, a bed was not a quiet rectangle of comfort. Let's begin our relaxing journey into the history of sleep before modern beds. Picture a room before central heating, before electric lamps, before white cotton sheets that came from a machine in a store. The room is dim. A little smoke from the hearth has settled into the beams. The walls hold the cold of the evening. Somewhere near the floor, straw rustles inside a cloth ticking, and a blanket of wool carries the faint smells of work, weather, and the bodies that used it before. This is not the bed most people imagine when they say they are going to sleep. There may be no private bedroom. There may be no door that closes softly. There may be another person in the same bed, or a child asleep nearby, or a servant lying in a smaller space close to the work of the house. The mattress might be straw, chaff, wool, feathers, or some layered mixture of whatever a household could afford. The support beneath it might be wood, rope, boards, earth, or stone. The light might come from fire, moon, or nothing at all. And still, night comes. The body must rest somewhere. This is the quiet history of that somewhere. A bed is never just a piece of furniture. A bed is a promise that the world will leave you alone long enough to become helpless for a few hours. For much of history, that promise was fragile. The night was cold. The floor was near. The bedding needed cleaning. The fire might go low. The roof might leak. The room might not belong to you. And even when the bed was grand, carved, curtained, and full of feathers, it still belonged to a world where sleep depended on labor, on someone cutting straw, shaking out blankets, stuffing ticks, tightening cords, warming stones, hanging curtains, keeping pests away, and keeping the house itself alive. They remind us that comfort is not simple, it is built. It can begin more than 200,000 years ago at Border Cave in South Africa. There, archaeologists reported evidence of grass bedding laid over ash. The Wits University summary of the research describes humans using grass for sleeping and working surfaces, with layers of ash beneath. The peer-reviewed science article gives the deeper archaeological foundation: fire and grass bedding construction at Border Cave around 200,000 years ago. That date matters. It takes us far beyond palaces, beyond farming villages, beyond writing, beyond cities, beyond the word mattress. It reminds us that the urge to make a better sleeping surface is very old. A human body does not love the bare ground. The ground is hard. It can be damp. It holds the night's cold. It has crawling life. It has dust, grit, small stones, old ash, and whatever the day's work has left behind. Not a bed in the modern sense, not a frame, not a room with a door, but a surface chosen and made, a place improved by the hand. Grass could soften a floor. It could separate skin from grit. It could make sitting, sleeping, nursing, tool-making, and resting a little more bearable. The ash is especially interesting. In the Border Cave research, ash layers are interpreted as part of the bedding system, and ash may have helped discourage crawling insects. That does not mean we should imagine a neat, ancient bedroom. It means something quieter and more practical. People were managing the living surface. They were renewing it. They were burning old plant matter. They were using what fire left behind. The bed begins as an arrangement. A patch of ground becomes a chosen place. Grass becomes a soft layer. Ash becomes a boundary. Fire becomes more than heat. It becomes a way of remaking the floor. Think about the small intelligence in that. No one needs a carved headboard to understand rest. No one needs a bedroom to understand that the body sleeps better when it is slightly raised, slightly softened, slightly protected. The early bed is not a luxury object. It is a solution. And like many solutions, it probably needed constant attention. Grass dries. Grass breaks. Grass can hold insects. Ash scatters. Smoke stains. The surface must be refreshed. The place where people sleep is also the place where people live, work, eat, and wait out the dark. A bed is not yet separate from life. That is one of the deepest differences between ancient sleep and modern sleep. Today, many people think of the bed as a specialized object. It is for sleep, perhaps reading, perhaps rest, but it is clearly separated from the rest of the house. In the oldest evidence, sleep belongs to the same surface as everything else. The body sleeps where the group lives. The cave does not give us a dream diary. It does not tell us whether people slept through the night. It does not tell us who slept where, or whether someone kept watch, or how children nestled into the warmer spaces. But it does give us something nearly as intimate. It gives us a floor someone cared enough to improve, and that is already a bed. Move forward many thousands of years to the stone houses of Skara Brae in Orkney. Skara Brae is a Neolithic settlement, preserved with a strange and quiet vividness. Its houses were built in stone, and because stone survives where wood, rushes, hides, and bedding decay, the site lets us see something rare, the shape of domestic life built into the room itself. Historic Environment Scotland describes Skara Brae as roughly 5,000 years old. The heart of Neolithic Orkney, which includes Skara Brae, is recognized by UNESCO for its importance. The houses contain fitted stone furniture. There are hearths, there are dressers, there are box-like structures identified as beds. This is not softness as we know it. It is a bed as a place in the room. Stone outlines the sleeping space. The hearth sits near the center. The furniture is part of the house rather than something easily moved. The bed is not just an object brought in after the room is built. It is part of the room's logic. Try to imagine lying there. The stone is not the mattress. The soft materials are mostly gone. Skins, heather, grasses, wool, textiles, or other organic bedding that would have made the platform usable. Archaeology gives us the durable frame, not the full feel. Still, the outline is powerful. A person sleeping inside one of those houses would be surrounded by stone, warmed by a central hearth, and sheltered from Orkney weather by an architecture of thick walls and enclosed space. The modern bedroom often tries to disappear. A smooth mattress, a soft pillow, and a quiet wall can make the sleeper forget the engineering around them. At Skara Brae, the bed is more visible. It is a built place, a box, a stone boundary. It says here is where the body goes when the work is done. There is comfort in that, but it is not modern comfort. Stone can hold cold. Smoke from the hearth can linger. The air may be damp. The wind outside can press against the settlement. The bedding must be brought in, dried, shaken, repaired, replaced. The sleeper belongs to a household world, where fire, food, storage, work, and rest are close together. The bed is not private in the later modern sense. It is part of the domestic room. It is visible. It is social. It is built into the same space where life is organized. The site also reminds us how uneven the evidence can be. Stone survives, but softness vanishes. The most important part of a bed, from the body's point of view, may be the very part history loses. So the quiet work of imagination must stay disciplined. We can say that Skara Brae preserves stone sleeping structures. We can say that the houses had hearths and built-in furnishings. We can say that people likely used softer organic materials on those sleeping places because bare stone is not a practical final surface for rest. But we should not pretend to know exactly how each bed felt. The past gives us a frame. The body fills in the question. How warm was it? How dry? How crowded? How many nights did smoke, wind, damp, or a crying child interrupt the dark? The stone beds of Skara Brae are quiet because they are so still. But they point to a world of movement, gathering bedding, feeding the fire, closing the room against weather, settling into an old house while the sea wind moves outside. Sleep, even here, is a task of arrangement. Now move to ancient Egypt, where one of the most surprising old sleeping objects is not a bed at all. To modern eyes, an Egyptian headrest can look uncomfortable. It often appears as a raised support with a curved top, designed not to cradle the whole head like a pillow, but to support the neck or hold the head slightly lifted. The Metropolitan Museum of Art has an Old Kingdom wooden headrest dated to about 2649 to 2100 BCE. The British Museum has an Egyptian wooden headrest from the 18th dynasty, dated around 1390 to 1295 BCE. These dates show that the object has a long history. The headrest is a different answer to a familiar problem. How do you hold the sleeping body? How do you rest the head? How do you keep the face clear of dust, heat, insects, hair, and bedding? In a hot climate, a thick, soft pillow may not always be desirable. It can trap warmth, it can collect sweat, it can hold dirt, it can press into carefully arranged hair. A headrest lifts the head and leaves air around it. Modern sleep often sinks downward. The body lowers into foam, cloth, springs, feathers, or fiber. The head drops into a pillow. The bed receives the body. With a headrest, sleep is more poised. The head is held. The neck is supported by a small, hard form. The body does not disappear into softness in quite the same way. Egyptian headrests also carried meanings beyond simple comfort. The Metropolitan Museum's headrest amulet record connects headrests to protection and funerary symbolism. That does not mean every headrest was only symbolic. It means the object lived in more than one world. It belonged to practical sleep, and also to ideas about protection, the head, the body, and the passage between night and waking. The headrest is a useful warning for this whole video. A modern viewer may look at a wooden or stone support and think impossible, but people learn materials. They learn posture. They learn the habits of a room, a climate, a hairstyle, a social world. What looks strange from a modern bed may have been useful, familiar, and even elegant in its own setting. Still, we do not have to pretend it was plush. The headrest reminds us that older beds often solved problems other than softness. Sometimes the goal was ventilation, sometimes elevation, sometimes status, sometimes cleanliness, sometimes protection, sometimes simply having a designated place where the body could rest without lying directly on the ground. An ancient Egyptian bed might include a wooden frame, woven support, mats, linen, and a headrest, but the surviving headrest, by itself, already tells us something intimate. Sleep was not just collapse. It was arranged. The head was placed, the neck was supported, the body entered a posture that belonged to that world. And somewhere in that posture, through heat and darkness, a person tried to sleep. Across many times and places, one of the simplest improvements a bed can offer is distance from the floor. The floor is where damp gathers. It is where dust settles. It is where insects move. It is where cold can press upward into the body. It is also where daily life leaves its traces. Dirt from shoes, ash from fire, spilled food, animal hair, rushes, straw, and the fine grit that follows people indoors. To lift the body even a little is to make a claim. This person is not sleeping directly in the dirt. The raised bed may be low, simple, and rough. It may be a frame with ropes, a platform, a bench-like structure, or a built stone compartment. It may hold a mattress of straw or wool. It may have no mattress by modern standards, but elevation itself is a technology. It changes airflow, it separates, it marks a place as special. And in many societies, it also marks status. The difference between lying on a bundle of straw near the floor and climbing into a raised, curtained, feather-filled bed is not just the difference between two sleeping surfaces. It is a difference in wealth, privacy, warmth, labor, and social position. A good bed could be valuable property. A bed could be named in inventories. Bedding could be inherited, bought secondhand, repaired, stolen, inspected, regulated, and displayed. In early modern England, the historical research article on making beds shows that beds were not just passive domestic objects. They were part of trades, laws, material standards, and household economies. The poor might sleep with little. The rich might sleep inside a textile room within a room. And between those extremes were countless practical arrangements: pallets, flock beds, straw beds, feather beds, wool mattresses, bolsters, blankets, sheets, curtains, cords, boards, chests, benches, and share beds. Modern language tends to compress all of this into one word: bed. But the old bed was a stack of decisions. What supports the body? What fills the mattress? What covers the sleeper? What keeps out the cold? What can be cleaned? What can be afforded? What can be moved? What can be shown to guests? What must be hidden? When we ask why people would not sleep well before modern beds, the answer is not simply that old beds were hard. Some were hard, some were soft, some were warmer than a modern minimalist room, some were magnificent, some were miserable. The deeper answer is that sleep depended on many fragile layers. If one layer failed, the night became difficult. Too little stuffing, too much damp, a sagging cord, a smoky room, a thin blanket, a noisy household. A shared bed, a flea, a louse, or a bedbug. A draft under the door, a fire that died before dawn. Modern sleep tries to simplify all of that into one purchased object. Older sleep often had to be assembled again and again. Source: Making Beds in Early Modern England. One of the most useful words in the old history of bedding is tick, not the insect. A bed tick was a casing that could be filled with material: straw, chaff, wool, feathers, or other stuffing. The tick held the bed together. Without it, the filling would scatter, bunch, spill, or mix with the floor. The historical research article on early modern England gives a careful view of this world. Bed frames often used interwoven cords or ropes for support. Mattresses or ticks were placed on top. Softer materials were not evenly available. A household might use straw or chaff beneath wool or feathers. A better bed required better filling, better fabric, better maintenance, and more money. It is available where grain is grown. It can be gathered and replaced. It creates bulk. It separates the body from a harder base. But straw is not stable like modern foam. It breaks, it compresses, it can poke through cloth, it can hold dust, it can rustle loudly when a sleeper turns. It can invite problems if damp or neglected. Chaff is smaller, lighter plant waste from threshing grain. It can fill space, but it can also settle and shift. Wool is warmer and more resilient. Feathers can be soft and prized, but they require birds, labor, cleaning, casing, and money. This is where comfort becomes class. A wealthy sleeper might own feather bedding, sheets, bolsters, blankets, and curtains. A poorer sleeper might make do with straw, a thin cover, a shared surface, or bedding that had already belonged to someone else. A servant might sleep near the place of work, not in a private chamber designed for rest. A child might sleep where there was room, and all of these beds had to be cared for. Bedding absorbs the body. That is an awkward but important truth. It takes in heat, sweat, skin, smoke, oils, dust, smells, and the small traces of everyday life. The more organic the bedding, the more attention it needs. Straw can be replaced. Feathers can be aired. Sheets can be washed when a household has the means. Ticks can be mended. blankets can be shaken. But none of that happens by magic. The bed is a place of rest built on work. Someone must gather, stuff, stitch, launder, beat, air, mend, carry, and turn. A clean bed is not just a thing, it is a routine. Modern people sometimes imagine historical sleep as quaint: a candle, a wooden bed, a wool blanket, a quiet room. But the old bed was often louder, smellier, and more alive than the picture suggests. The straw crackled, the ropes creaked, the house breathed cold through gaps, the fire smoked, the room was shared. And the sleeper, tired from work, had to accept the bed not as perfection, but as enough. Enough is an old form of comfort. Source: Making Beds in Early Modern England. Before modern box springs and engineered slats became ordinary, many wooden bedsteads used interwoven cords or ropes. The idea is simple. A wooden frame gives the shape. Ropes cross the frame to create support. A mattress or tick rests on the cords. The body rests on the mattress. The whole system depends on tension. Tension is a quiet thing until it fails. A tightrope bed can hold the body high enough. A loose one sags. It can pull the sleeper toward the middle. It can make the mattress uneven. It can creak when weight shifts. It can need tightening, repair, or replacement. This is why the old bed is not one object. It is a small machine made of wood, cord, cloth, stuffing, covering, and maintenance. It also changes the way we think about sleep. Modern mattresses invite passivity. You buy the object, you place it on a frame, you replace it after years. The bed simply is. A rope bed has to be kept in condition. Its comfort depends on the materials, the knots, the tension, the frame, the quality of the tick, and the weight of the sleeper. It is easier to understand the bed as a craft object, part furniture and part tool. There is a common story that the phrase "sleep tight" comes from tightening rope beds. It is appealing. It is also a claim we are not using here, because we are not going to build a fact on a charming story without a strong source. We can talk about rope beds without leaning on folklore. The real history is interesting enough. A rope bed turns sleep into a balance between softness and suspension. Too much give, and the body sinks. Too little give, and the bed is hard. The cords must hold, but not cut upward through the mattress. The frame must stay square. The stuffing must not settle too far into the gaps. Imagine lying down after a long day. The rope beneath the mattress answers with a small sound. The frame adjusts. The straw or wool shifts. The blanket comes up. The room settles around you. Perhaps the bed is good. Perhaps it is better than the floor by a very long distance. But it is not silent. It is not sealed away from the rest of life. It is a bed that reminds you it is holding you. And that may be one of the great differences between old and modern beds. Modern comfort often hides the structure. We do not feel the spring, the slat, the filling, or the labor. Older beds sometimes made the structure part of the experience. The body knew the frame, the ear heard the rope, the back learned the uneven place, the hand knew where the blanket was thin. Sleep was physical in a way that is easy to forget. If a bed can be simple, it can also become grand. In early modern houses, a bed could be one of the most valuable objects a family owned. It could be carved, curtained, hung with textiles, and placed in a chamber that was not only private, but public. Some beds were seen. Some were displayed. Some announced the household's rank as clearly as clothing or silver. The Victoria and Albert Museum's Great Bed of Ware is an unforgettable example. It dates to about 1590 to 1600 and is famous for its enormous size. It is not evidence of ordinary nightly comfort. It is an exceptional object, a kind of public marvel. But that is precisely why it helps us. It shows how a bed could become spectacle, status, and story. A bed is where the body sleeps, but it can also be where wealth speaks. The Metropolitan Museum's period rooms and bed textile records show another part of this world: bed hangings, curtains, and the best chamber. A curtain bed could hold warmth. It could create privacy inside a shared or multifunctional room. It could also display costly fabric and careful work. The old wealthy bed might be a room within a room. Curtains could be drawn. Drafts could be softened. Light could be blocked. The sleeper could be surrounded by textile walls. In a house where rooms had many uses, where servants moved, where guests might be received, and where privacy was not arranged like a modern floor plan, the bed curtain mattered. It did not only decorate, it sheltered, it hid, it warmed, it created a temporary chamber around the most vulnerable human act. But the very luxury of a great bed also tells us about the lack beneath it. If curtains, feathers, bolsters, sheets, and hangings were signs of wealth, then many people lived with much less. The soft old bed was not the default human condition. Even wealthy comfort had burdens. Heavy textiles gathered dust and smoke. Hangings needed cleaning. Feathers needed care. The bedstead had to be assembled, maintained, moved, inherited, or sold. In a world without modern laundering, pest control, sealed windows, central heat, or mechanical cleaning, luxury could still be laborious. The bed was not simply where a person slept. It was where household wealth, domestic work, privacy, and vulnerability met. That is why old inventories cared about beds. That is why laws and trades cared about bedding materials. That is why a bed could appear in a will, a room description, a museum collection, or a court record. The bed was intimate, but it was not small. It had social weight. Source: Making Beds in Early Modern England. One of the least romantic parts of bed history is stuffing. What is inside the mattress? A modern person may not think about that very often. The mattress is sealed. Its materials are printed on a label. It is bought new or used with some hesitation. But older bedding could hide a great deal inside cloth. The historical research article describes early modern English concern over bedding materials. In London, upholders and upholsterers worried about improper or dirty stuffing. The article discusses references from 1474 and 1495, and later company of upholders court searches from 1679 to 1723. These are not bedtime fairy tale details. They are practical urban worries. If a mattress can be stuffed, it can be cheated. If bedding can be sold, it can be filled with poorer material than promised. If old bedding can be remade, its contents can carry dirt, smell, pests, or disease anxieties. The mattress becomes a hidden world. That is one reason old sleep can feel so different from modern sleep. The sleeper trusted a casing of fabric. Inside it might be straw, chaff, wool, hair, feathers, or mixtures. Some materials were better. Some were cheaper. Some were cleaner. Some were suspicious. The bed held what the eye could not see. This does not mean every old bed was filthy. That would be too simple and unfair. Households cared for bedding. People aired, shook, cleaned, replaced, and regulated it. But the worry itself tells us that bedding was an active problem. The bed was porous. It belonged to trade, law, and inspection because it could be made badly. It could deceive the buyer. It could hold old material. It could look acceptable on the outside while being poor within. There's a quiet metaphor here. Rest depends on hidden things. A modern mattress hides springs, foam, fabric layers, adhesives, and engineering. An early modern tick hid stuffing, dust, work, and trust. In both cases, the sleeper lies down on something they cannot fully see. But older sleepers had fewer guarantees. The night could be disturbed by exactly what the bed concealed. Not everyone slept in the same kind of room. This seems obvious, but it matters deeply. The history of beds is also the history of inequality. Some people slept inside curtained beds with feather bedding. Others slept in servants' rooms, attics, shared quarters, workspaces, or simpler beds made from humbler materials. The National Trust's discussion of Georgian and Victorian servants' rooms helps us see a later version of this pattern. Servants' sleeping spaces were tied to household hierarchy and labor. Their rooms could be plain, their hours could be long. Their rest belonged to the work of the house. The bedroom for them was not a sanctuary in the modern sense. It was part of employment. Earlier periods had their own versions of this inequality. The evidence changes by time and place, but the pattern is familiar. Wealth buys softness, privacy, warmth, and clean textiles. Poverty accepts what is available. A person with little money might not own a bedstead. A bed might be shared. Bedding might be second-hand. Straw might be replaced when possible. A blanket might be thin. A room might be crowded. A household might sleep close to heat because heat was scarce. The problem is not only the bed. It is the house around the bed. If the room is cold, the bed must compensate. If the room is smoky, the bedding absorbs it. If the walls are damp, the blankets feel it. If work begins before dawn, sleep ends early. If another person coughs, shifts, wakes, leaves, or returns, the sleeper hears it. Modern sleep advice often speaks to the individual. Keep your room cool, dark, and quiet. Keep regular hours. Make the bed comfortable. Many historical sleepers did not have that control. They slept where status allowed. They slept where work required. They slept where there was space. The wealthy bed could be a fortress of curtains. The poor bed could be a compromise with the floor. Both are history. Older sleep was not only different because of beds, it was also different because of night itself. Historian A. Roger Eckerch is strongly associated with the study of segmented sleep in pre-industrial societies. The idea is often summarized as first sleep and second sleep. People might sleep for a first stretch, wake for a period in the night, and then return to sleep for a second stretch. Eckerch's article, Segmented Sleep in Pre-Industrial Societies, discusses historical evidence for this pattern, but we have to be careful. It is easy to turn first sleep and second sleep into a simple internet fact. Everyone slept in 2 shifts until electric light. That is too broad. Recent scholarship, including a reconsideration of segmented sleep in early modern England, adds nuance. The pattern was documented, but the evidence should not be flattened into a universal rule for every person, every night, every culture, or every class. In parts of pre-industrial Europe and in historical sources studied by Eckerch and others, sleep could be imagined and described in segments. A person might wake in the night not as a failure, but as part of the long dark. What would that feel like? The first sleep begins after evening work, after firelight, after conversation, prayer, worry, or exhaustion. The room grows dark. The body settles into straw, wool, feather, rope, curtain, or floor. The house quiets. Then, sometime later, the sleeper wakes. Not to a phone, not to a glowing clock, but to darkness. Maybe the fire is low. Maybe another sleeper has shifted. Maybe the cold has entered the bed. Maybe a sound outside has pulled the mind upward. Maybe the body simply wakes because the night is long. In that waking period, people might pray, think, talk, tend to fire, visit, make love, or simply wait. Modern people sometimes fear waking at night because we measure sleep against the ideal of one clean block. A segmented sleep history reminds us that night has been organized in other ways. But it does not make old sleep easy. If the room is cold, waking is cold. If bedding is poor, waking is uncomfortable. If the house is crowded, waking is not private. If work begins before dawn, second sleep may be too short. The old night might have had a rhythm. That combination is perfect for sleepy cat, calm, strange, sourced, and human. Source: EPA Bedbug Biology. No history of old sleep should become a horror story. Still, we should be honest about insects. The EPA's modern bedbug information describes bedbugs as insects that feed on blood and hide in small places. They are flat, able to tuck into seams and cracks, and associated with places where people rest. We should use this source for biology, not for claiming exactly how common bedbugs were in every historical period. The important point is simpler. Bedding is habitat. It is warm. It is close to bodies. It has folds, seams, stuffing, boards, cracks, curtains, and shadows. In older houses where bedding was organic, rooms were smoky, washing was laborious, and pests were harder to manage, insects were part of the worry of sleep. The border cave ash evidence reminds us that humans have long tried to manage crawling pests around sleeping surfaces. Early modern bedding regulation reminds us that the inside of bedding mattered. Bed curtains and wooden frames created warmth and privacy, but also places where dust and small life might gather. Again, not every bed was crawling. We do not need to exaggerate. But the modern bed is often protected by a whole system: washable sheets, vacuum cleaners, sealed floors, pest control knowledge, laundry machines, synthetic materials, screens, climate control, and the habit of buying bedding as a clean packaged object. Older sleepers had fewer barriers, so sleep required watchfulness. Shake the bedding, air it, beat it, replace the straw, mend the tick, keep the room as clean as possible. The bed was not a passive comfort. It was a living maintenance problem. And perhaps that makes the old bed feel more human. It was imperfect, but tended. It had to be cared for because the sleeper was helpless inside it. Cold is one of the oldest enemies of sleep. A modern bedroom may be heated by a system hidden behind walls. The air may be held at a chosen temperature. A thermostat may do what servants, firewood, shutters, curtains, and wool once tried to do. Before central heating, warmth was local. It came from a fire, a bed curtain, a blanket, another body, heated stones or pans in some contexts, clothing, caps, and the ability of the bed itself to trap heat. The farther from the fire, the colder the room. The longer the night, the more the heat faded. A curtained bed makes deep practical sense here. Draw the curtains, and the bed becomes a smaller climate. It holds breath and body heat. It blocks some drafts. It softens the open room. It gives the sleeper a private pocket of warmth. This is why bed hangings are not only decorative in the history of sleep. They are environmental technology. Textile walls in a cold room can matter. A wool blanket matters. A raised bed matters. A straw or feather filling matters. A cap on the head matters. The body, asleep and still, needs protection from the slow work of cold. The poor sleeper had fewer layers. The servant might be cold after tending the comfort of others. The person on a pallet near the floor might feel drafts more sharply. Even a wealthy person, in a grand curtained bed, lived in a house where warmth had to be made, carried, conserved, and watched. Modern sleep health advice often recommends a cool room, but cool is not the same as uncontrolled cold. A cool room with warm bedding is a very different thing from a drafty room with poor covering. The old bed's work was to make a small weather of its own. Sometimes it succeeded. Sometimes it did not. Some old beds were high enough that a bed step made sense. The Metropolitan Museum has late 18th century French bed steps, a small reminder that climbing into bed could be a physical act. High beds could keep the body farther from floor drafts, damp, and dirt. They could also make the bed more imposing. A tall bed with curtains is not just furniture. It is a stage. The sleeper ascends. The curtains close. The room disappears. And inside the little fabric chamber, the body tries to rest. The great bed of ware takes the theatrical side to an extreme. Dating to 1590 to 1600, it is famous because it is enormous. It became a thing people talked about, a bed large enough to turn ordinary sleep into spectacle. We should not use it as an example of a normal bed. We should use it as evidence that the bed could become an object of public fascination. But even more ordinary bedsteads could carry status. Carving, height, hangings, fabric, and placement all mattered. In some houses, the best bed might stand in a best chamber. It could be part of how a family presented itself. That feels strange if we think bedrooms must be private. But in many earlier households, rooms were more flexible. A chamber might be a place of sleeping, storage, receiving, dining, and display. The bed was intimate, but not always hidden. At night, it holds the tired body. By day, it can show the household's wealth. This is one of the quiet dramas of old sleep. The most private human need was wrapped inside public meanings. Modern comfort did not arrive all at once. It came through many changes. Textiles, trade, laundering, manufacturing, springs, upholstery, metalwork, sanitation, private rooms, heating, and eventually the modern mattress industry. One small marker appears in an 1865 United States patent for an improved spring mattress. We should not call it the first modern mattress without stronger evidence, but it is useful as a dated sign of innovation. By the mid-19th century, inventors were thinking mechanically about how a mattress could support a body. They allow give and return. They distribute weight. They turn comfort into a more engineered experience. Over time, modern beds become less like sacks of organic material and more like design systems. The Met's 19th century bedsteads, including an 1815 to 1825 Duncan Fife bedstead and an 1830 to 1860 Shaker bedstead, show that bed forms continued to change in style and construction. The frame, the mattress, the bedding, and the room were all part of a long transformation. But the important word is long. Modern sleep comfort is not one invention. It is a chain from grass to ash, from stone platforms to wooden frames, from headrests to pillows, from straw ticks to feather beds, from rope supports to springs, from bed curtains to heated rooms, from shared chambers to private bedrooms, from hand washing to laundry machines, from smoky hearths to sealed windows and electric lights. The modern bed is a quiet pile of history. Most of the time, we do not notice it. We lie down and call it normal. One of the easiest ways to misunderstand an old bed is to look only at the moment of lying down. The sleeper is tired. The candle is low. The blanket comes up. The room grows quiet. But before that moment, there is work. A bed has to be made in the older and fuller sense of the word, not only straightened, made, stuffed, sewn, filled, carried, aired, turned, repaired, washed if washing is possible, shaken if washing is not, protected from damp, protected from pests, protected from smoke and soot as much as the house allows. The article on making beds in early modern England is useful because it reminds us that beds were material systems. A bed tick had to contain its filling. Cords had to support the mattress. Coverings had to keep the sleeper warm. Bedding could be bought, sold, regulated, and inspected. It existed inside a whole world of craft and household labor. That labor was not evenly shared or evenly visible. In wealthier houses, servants might handle much of the physical work that allowed others to sleep in comfort. The National Trust's later Georgian and Victorian servant room material shows how servants' lives and sleeping spaces were tied to the running of the household. Their rest existed in the shadow of other people's comfort. They made rooms usable. They tended fires. They cleaned. They rose early. They lived near service corridors, attics, workrooms, and household rhythms that were not arranged around their own ease. So when we imagine an old bed, we should imagine two nights at once: the night of the person who sleeps in the bed, and the night of the person whose work makes that bed possible. Someone gathers straw. Someone mends the fabric. Someone keeps linen from becoming too dirty. Someone moves bedding into sun or air when the weather allows. Someone checks whether the bed smells damp. Someone notices whether the cords have loosened. Someone replaces what is broken down inside the tick. Modern life hides much of this inside machines and markets. Laundry machines, packaged bedding, vacuum cleaners, mattress factories, synthetic fillings, elastic sheets, sealed windows, and thermostats all make the bed feel like a personal object. Older beds make it easier to see the social object underneath. The bed is not only yours. It belongs to the field that grew the straw, the sheep that gave wool, the bird that gave feathers, the person who wove the cloth, the hand that tied the cord, the servant who shook the blanket, the household that could afford a better filling or could not. This is why the old bed is such a good sleepy topic. It is quiet but not empty. Every layer has a story, and every story has a date, a material, a body, and a small kind of need. A bed does not keep a person warm by itself. It needs help. Before modern heating, the body might go to bed with more clothing than a modern sleeper expects. Night clothes, caps, extra blankets, and layered coverings helped create warmth around the body. A cap could matter because the head loses heat quickly. A blanket could matter because the fire might not last. Curtains could matter because the room itself might be too large, too drafty, or too cold to heat evenly. The old sleeper did not simply enter a bed. The old sleeper entered a small weather system. There was the air of the room, then the air inside the curtains, then the air beneath the blanket, then the warmth held close to the skin. Each boundary mattered. Each layer slowed the loss of heat. This makes a curtained bed easier to understand. To a modern eye, bed curtains can look theatrical or decorative. They can be beautiful, embroidered, expensive, and symbolic. But they also answer a simple physical problem. A bed curtain makes a smaller space. It can soften drafts. It can hold warmth. It can create darkness. It can make one corner of a cold room into a more survivable place. The blanket is another kind of wall. Wool, linen, fur, feathers, straw, and cloth all participate in the same quiet negotiation. The sleeping body gives off heat. The bed tries to hold it. The room tries to take it away. That negotiation can decide whether a person sleeps deeply or wakes again and again. When we speak about old discomfort, we should avoid making people of the past seem foolish. They were not ignorant because their beds were different. They were practical inside their materials. If a house is cold, sleep in clothing. If the room is drafty, hang curtains. If the floor is damp, raise the bed. If the mattress is hard, add straw, wool, or feather if you have it. If insects are a problem, air the bedding, clean what can be cleaned, and use the knowledge available. Old sleep was not modern sleep done badly. It was a different set of solutions. But the body still knew discomfort. It knew cold toes. It knew heavy blankets that warmed but pressed. It knew the ache of a poor mattress. It knew the relief of one extra layer. In that sense, the old bed is very easy to understand. We still know the little rituals of getting comfortable. We still pull a blanket higher. We still turn a pillow. We still notice the draft. We still wake if the room is wrong. The difference is that modern life gives many people more control over the room. The old sleeper had to negotiate with the house. Privacy is one of the great modern luxuries of sleep. A person today may close a bedroom door and expect the room to belong mostly to them. Even if the rest of life is busy, the bed can become a boundary. Older households often work differently. Rooms could have many uses. People might sleep near family, servants, apprentices, visitors, or other workers. Beds could be shared for warmth, economy, status, or simple lack of space. Sleeping arrangements were shaped by age, gender, work, wealth, season, and household structure. This matters because sleep is vulnerable. A shared room means shared sounds. Breathing, coughing, turning, whispering. Someone rising in the dark, someone returning late, a child waking, a door shifting, a floorboard answering wait, the fire settling, wind pressing the shutters, rain tapping the roof, an animal moving outside or inside the house. Not every sound is unpleasant. Some are comforting. The sound of another person nearby can make a room feel safe. A household breathing together can be its own kind of lullaby. Shared warmth can be practical and gentle. A crowded room is not automatically a miserable room, but it is not private, and lack of privacy changes sleep. You cannot fully control the timing of another body. You cannot choose every noise. You may not choose when light enters, when the fire is tended, when a servant moves, when a child wakes, when work resumes. The bed is intimate, but the room may be communal. This helps explain why bed curtains mattered beyond warmth. A curtain cannot create a modern private bedroom. It cannot erase sound. It cannot remove the shared household, but it can create a small inner space. It says, inside this cloth, the body rests. For a wealthy sleeper, that boundary could be thick, patterned, costly, and impressive. For a humbler sleeper, the boundary might be a blanket pulled over the shoulder, the edge of a pallet, or the quiet hope that no one will step too close in the dark. Old sleeplessness might happen among others. That is a different kind of waking. The modern bedroom has a switch. That small fact changes the night. Before electric lighting, darkness was not a style. It was an event. Fire, candle, rushlight, lamp, moon, and dawn shaped the hours. Light cost labor and materials. Darkness was large. It filled corners. It made the room deeper than it looked by day. This changes how we understand first sleep and second sleep. If the night is very long, and if artificial light is limited, sleep may settle into a broader rhythm. People may go to bed earlier in winter. They may wake during the night. They may speak, pray, tend the fire, or simply lie quietly before sleep returns. The modern assumption of one clean sleep block is not the only way humans have organized night. But again, we should keep the claim careful. Historical sources document segmented sleep patterns in many contexts, and scholars continue to debate how universal and how consistent those patterns were. Still, the darkness itself is not in doubt. A pre-electric night is not merely a modern room with the lights off. It is a different world. The bed sits inside it. The walls are known by memory. The floor is felt rather than seen. The fire makes shadows then fails. The moon helps or does not. A candle is precious enough that one does not burn it thoughtlessly all night. If a person wakes, the wakefulness has texture. The eyes open into dark. The body feels the bedding before it sees the room. The ear becomes larger. The mind listens. This can be peaceful. It can also be uneasy. The same darkness that permits rest can hold worry. A modern sleep video often tries to recreate a gentle version of that older darkness. A candle, a hearth, rain, quiet water, a steady voice, and no sudden demands. But we should remember that the historical darkness was not an aesthetic. It was a condition people had to live inside. A bed is a border. On one side is the human body, warm and sleeping. On the other side is everything that wants to enter. Cold, damp, dust, fleas, lice, bedbugs, smoke, smell, noise, and the roughness of the floor. Modern beds are full of borders, a mattress cover, a fitted sheet, a protector, a frame, a floor that can be cleaned, a room that can be sealed, a window screen, a vacuum, a laundry machine, a pest control plan, a thermostat. Older beds had borders too, but they were more fragile. Grass over ash at Border Cave is a very ancient border. It may have helped manage insects. A raised bed is a border. A bed tick is a border. A curtain is a border. A blanket is a border. A clean sheet is a border. A corded frame is a border between body and floor. The bed's job is to make the body's surrender safer. This is why the little practical details matter so much. A seam in a tick, a crack in a bed frame, a draft under a door, a damp wall, a blanket thin at the edge, a rope that sags. These are not dramatic historical battles, but they matter more to sleep than kings and castles do. The sleepy truth is that history is often decided by small materials. A night can be ruined by a lump in the mattress. A winter can feel longer because the bedding never fully dries. A servant's sleep can be shortened by duties before dawn. A child can wake because the room has gone cold. And yet people slept, they adjusted, they shared warmth, they repaired, they endured. They made beds from the world they had. Modern comfort is powerful, partly because it feels invisible. If a bedroom is quiet, clean, warm enough, cool enough, dark enough, and private enough, the sleeper may not notice the room at all. That is the achievement. The best modern bed can make its own history disappear. The mattress does not rustle like straw. The springs or foam are hidden. The sheet is smooth. The pillow is soft. The blanket is clean. The floor is not the sleeping surface. The insects are not expected. The light turns off at command. The room has a door. This is not the normal state of all human history. It is a late arrangement made from many systems working together. Manufacturing, trade, laundry, heating, glass windows, screens, urban sanitation, consumer goods, public health, electric light. A bed is where all those systems become intimate. The 1865 spring mattress patent is one small marker in that larger story. It shows a moment when support and comfort were being engineered in new ways. But the modern bed is not made by springs alone. It is made by the whole room and the whole society around the room. Modern sleep advice from institutions such as Mayo Clinic, CDC, and NINS often emphasizes sleep quality, regularity, and environment. Cool, dark, quiet, comfortable, and consistent conditions are easier to recommend when the sleeper has some control over space. The old sleeper often had less control. That is the quiet privilege hidden inside a modern bed. To choose the blanket, to close the door, to wash the sheets easily, to sleep without smoke, to trust that the mattress is clean. To wake because morning has come, not because the room has become too cold. Of course, not everyone today has that comfort. Housing, work, noise, climate, illness, and stress still shape sleep. But the modern ideal of bed as private comfort is historically unusual. The old bed helps us see it. Because beds are so ordinary now, it is easy to forget how valuable bedding could be. A bed was not only where someone slept. It could be property. It could be part of a household's wealth. It could be repaired instead of replaced. It could be passed along, sold, inherited, pawned, inspected, or described in an inventory. A bed carried money in the form of wood, cloth, thread, stuffing, feathers, wool, labor, curtains, and time. This gives the old bed a strange double life. At night, it receives the unconscious body. By day, it may be an asset. For a poorer household, bedding might represent a hard-won level of security. Straw is replaceable, but cloth is not free. Wool is not free. Feathers are not free. A wooden frame is not free. A blanket is not free. Even an imperfect bed can represent stored labor. For a wealthier household, the bed could become display. The V&A's great bed of ware is exceptional, but it shows the direction clearly. The bed could be famous. It could be talked about. It could make sleep into social theater. The Met's bed curtains and hangings remind us that textiles around a bed could carry beauty and cost. They could turn the bed into a textile chamber, a warm enclosure, and a statement of status. But valuable bedding also created risk. If bedding could be sold, it could be misrepresented. If it could be stuffed, it could be stuffed poorly. If it could be bought second-hand, it could carry traces of other lives. If it was valuable, it could be stolen or fought over. If it was inherited, it carried memory. The old bed was not disposable in the modern sense. Many modern sleepers can imagine replacing a pillow, ordering sheets, or buying a new mattress after years of use. That is not universal even now, but it is part of the modern ideal. Older bedding often had to be kept going, mend the seam, patch the tick, restuff the thin place, turn the mattress, shake the blanket, air the feathers, tighten the cords. Do not waste what took so much work to gather. This makes the bed a kind of household memory. It remembers who had the money for feathers. It remembers who slept in the cold corner. It remembers whose hands repaired the cloth. It remembers the smoke of winter, the damp of spring, the summer airing, the illness in the room, the birth, the death, the servant's early rising, the child's restless turning. Of course, the bed does not literally remember. Textiles wear at the edges. Wood darkens where hands touch. Ropes stretch. Straw breaks. Curtains fade. The bed becomes the quiet witness of nights no one wrote down. This is one reason old bed history feels so intimate. Kings leave documents. Battles leave dates. Laws leave records. But sleep leaves worn fabric. And worn fabric is history too. Let us put the pieces together carefully. Not as one universal night, because there was no single old night. A Neolithic house in Orkney, an Egyptian home, a medieval cottage, an early modern London room, and a Georgian servant's attic are not the same world. But we can make a composite scene from the kinds of problems the sources allow. The room is not empty. It has objects that still belong to work. A stool, a chest, a small table, folded cloth, fire tools, perhaps a place where food was prepared, perhaps a corner where someone else will sleep. The bed is not simply waiting like a modern mattress under a white sheet. If it is straw or chaff, the filling has settled. If it is wool, it has held warmth but also weight. If it is feather, it must be kept from damp. If it rests on cords, the support beneath it may complain softly as someone sits down. If there are curtains, they are drawn not only for beauty, but for warmth and a little privacy. The first sensation may not be softness. It may be the texture of cloth, the unevenness of stuffing, the smell of wool, the nearness of another body, the sound of the household becoming quiet, though not silent. A modern bed tries to remove the room. This old bed reveals it. You hear the room because the room matters. You smell the fire because heat matters. You feel the blanket because the blanket is the wall between your skin and the cold. You notice the floor because the floor is too close. You know where the candle is because darkness will come. The body turns, straw shifts, a rope creaks, someone breathes nearby. The curtain moves a little in a draft. The fire gives a small sound and then settles again. This is not a bad night automatically. It may be peaceful. It may be ordinary. It may be exactly what the sleeper expects. Comfort is learned, and rest can be found in conditions that later people would consider difficult. But it is a night with fewer guarantees. The bed cannot promise silence. It cannot promise cleanliness by default. It cannot promise warmth until morning. It cannot promise privacy. It cannot promise that waking at midnight is a problem or not a problem. It can only offer what its materials can hold. And that is why the history of old beds is so gentle and so humbling. It is not only about hardship. It is about human patience with imperfect comfort. It is about accepting the bed one has, making it better where possible, and learning how to rest inside limits. When people ask how anyone slept before modern mattresses, the answer is simple and complicated. They slept because they had to. They slept because bodies are generous and stubborn. They slept because the bed, however poor, was still a chosen place. They slept because night comes for everyone. And each morning the bed returned to work. The curtains opened. The blanket was shaken. The body rose. The room became day before the final quiet thought. There is one more thing the old bed asks us to notice. Comfort was not only an object, it was a job. Today, a bed can look passive. A mattress waits. A pillow waits. A sheet waits. Even when the room is messy, the basic structure remains. The mattress does not need to be tightened each night. The floor does not have to be managed with ash. The bed is not usually a storage object, a status object, a shared household object, and a pest risk object, all at once. Older beds asked for more attention. A straw tick could flatten. A rope support could loosen. A blanket could hold smoke. A linen sheet could gather dampness from the room. A curtain could keep warmth close, but it could also collect dust and smell. A bed that was comfortable on one night could become less comfortable by the next week, simply because materials change under the weight of bodies. Straw crushes, wool mats down, feathers shift, rope stretches, cloth absorbs. This is why the history of sleep is also the history of maintenance. The bed did not merely exist, it had to be kept. Think of the quiet sequence after morning. The person rises, the cover is turned back, the bedding is shaken, the room receives air if weather allows, the fire is tended or allowed to die, the straw, wool, feathers, or linen begin drying from the warmth and damp of the night. There is nothing dramatic in this. It is ordinary, and because it is ordinary, it is easy to miss. But for most of human history, sleep belonged to the daily work of the household. The bed was not only a place to collapse, it was a material system that needed care. The care might be light or heavy, skilled or improvised, rich or poor, depending on the household, but it was still care. A rope bed is a good example. The phrase sleep tight is often explained as if it certainly comes from tightening ropes on beds. That explanation is popular, but it should be treated carefully. The history of phrases is not always as neat as internet tradition makes it sound. What we can say without forcing the phrase is that rope beds did use cord tension as part of their support. If the cord sagged, the bed changed under the sleeper. That is enough. We do not need the myth to see the material truth. The body could feel the change, and someone sooner or later had to bring the bed back into order. The same is true of stuffing. A mattress filled with straw, chaff, wool, flock, or feathers was not a sealed modern object. It was closer to a container of materials. It could be turned, it could be shaken, it could be opened or remade in some contexts. It could be refreshed when the household had the means to refresh it. It could also remain poor, thin, stale, or uncomfortable when the household did not. This gives old sleep a practical honesty. The bed was not separate from work. It was one more place where the household's resources became visible. When sources describe or preserve great beds, bed hangings, bedsteads, and period rooms, they often show the visible part of comfort: wood, curtains, textile, carving, height, enclosure. The Victoria and Albert Museum's Great Bed of Ware, dated about 1590 to 1600, makes this visible in an extreme way. It was enormous, it was famous, it turned a bed into spectacle. But ordinary comfort was often quieter than spectacle. It was whether the blanket was dry, whether the straw had been flattened beyond usefulness, whether the rope support sagged, whether the room had enough warmth to hold the cold away, whether the bed curtains kept a pocket of air close to the sleeper, whether the body could rest without waking too often from draft, noise, crowding, smoke, or irritation. That last word, irritation, matters. Beds attract life because bodies attract life. The EPA's modern bedbug information is not a source for every old bedroom. It should not be used to claim that every historical bed was infested, but it does explain why beds are vulnerable places. Bedbugs are flat, hide in seams and cracks, and feed where people sleep. Once you understand that biology, older bedding materials become easier to imagine as complicated habitats. Seams, wood joints, straw, fabric folds, curtain seams, cracks in furniture, and crowded sleeping places could all create small hiding places. Again, the tone should stay gentle. This is not a horror story. It is a material story. A bed is warm. A bed has seams. A bed holds human smell. A bed is used night after night. So the work of sleep included the work of keeping the sleeping place tolerable. There is a philosophy inside that maintenance. The bed teaches that comfort is rarely one invention. It is repetition. It is the same act done again and again until the body can trust the room. Shake the blanket, smooth the linen, close the curtain, move the embers, find the least damp corner, lift the body off the ground, lift the head from the bedding, keep the straw from scattering, keep the cold from entering, keep the dark from feeling endless. None of those acts alone creates perfect sleep. Together they create enough, and enough is one of the most important words in the history of rest. Before the modern mattress, enough could mean grass over ash more than 200,000 years ago. It could mean a stone-built sleeping place at Skara Brae, roughly 5,000 years old, softened by materials that have mostly not survived. It could mean an Egyptian headrest dated in museum collections to the Old Kingdom, about 2649 to 2100 BCE, or to the 18th dynasty, about 1390 to 1295 BCE, holding the neck in a way that looks strange to us but made sense in its own world. It could mean a curtained bed that made a warmer chamber inside a cold room. It could mean an enormous public marvel like the Great Bed of Ware, about 1590 to 1600, whose size tells us as much about status and storytelling as it does about sleep. It could mean a small technical step, like an 1865 patent for an improved spring mattress, one dated marker in the long move toward engineered support. Each moment changes the answer to the same quiet question: how do we make the body feel held? And the answer is never only softness. Softness is important, but it is only one layer. The bed also answers height. It answers air. It answers warmth. It answers damp. It answers insects. It answers privacy. It answers status. It answers the awkward fact that a sleeping body cannot defend itself very well. This is why a stone bed at Skara Brae, an Egyptian headrest, a medieval straw tick, a rope bed, a curtain chamber, and an improved spring mattress patent from 1865 can all belong to the same long story, even though they look nothing alike. They are not the same solution. They are different solutions to the same vulnerable human posture. The body lies down, the eyes close, the room must do the rest. Sometimes the room does very little. Sometimes it does a great deal. But every improvement, whether it is ash below grass, stone around a hearth, linen over straw, cord beneath a mattress, curtains around a bed, or springs beneath cloth, is a way of asking the night to become a little more manageable. That is the deep continuity, not luxury, not perfection, manageability. The old bed says, we cannot remove the whole night, but we can make a place inside it, not perfectly held, not permanently held, just held enough for tonight. That is why old beds can feel so moving. They are not as soft as ours. They are not as clean as ours. They are not as private, quiet, stable, or washable as ours, but they show a repeated human refusal to leave sleep entirely to chance. Even when the materials were rough, people arranged them. Even when the room was cold, people enclosed warmth. Even when the support sagged, people remade it. Even when the darkness was long, people gave the body a place. This makes the old bed less like an object, and more like a small nightly agreement between a person and a household. The agreement says, the day has asked enough. Now the room will try to be kind. Maybe it will not succeed completely. Maybe the blanket will scratch. Maybe the straw will rustle. Maybe the fire will fade too soon. Maybe another sleeper will turn. Maybe the floor will hold cold. Maybe the old mattress will remember every body that has pressed into it. Still, the bed is prepared. Still, the person lies down. Still, the night begins to soften. That is the quiet labor hidden beneath every historical bedroom. The work of making a rough world just gentle enough for sleep. Time again. A bed is a small place where the human body admits the truth. It cannot watch forever. It cannot work forever. It cannot stay guarded forever. At some point, it must become still. That is why the history of beds is more than furniture history. It is the history of how people made trust out of materials. Grass and ash, stone and hearth, wood and rope, cloth and straw, wool and feather, curtain and blanket, spring and frame. Each layer says the same thing in a different century. Let the body rest here. And because people are not equal, beds have never been equal. Some slept high and curtained. Some slept low and cold. Some slept alone. Some slept beside family, servants, strangers, children, animals, or work. Some woke after first sleep and found the night calm. Others woke and found only cold, hunger, pain, duty, or worry. The modern bed can make all of this disappear. That is part of its magic. But when you see the old bed clearly, modern comfort becomes less ordinary. A clean sheet is not small. A quiet room is not small. A mattress that does not sag into rope, straw, or stone is not small. A warm blanket in a private room is not small. It is a very old human wish, finally made easier. And now, as this quiet history settles, you can imagine the old rooms growing still. The straw has stopped rustling. The curtain has been drawn. The stone walls hold the last of the day's warmth. The head rests, the body lets go, and across thousands of years, in caves, stone houses, wooden rooms, curtained chambers, servants' attics, and quiet modern bedrooms, people have done the same simple, difficult thing. They have trusted the night enough to sleep.